Everyone, it's time to go on the record.
I call it extreme vetting. Our country has enough problems. Need more.
ISIS strategy, asking for black votes, and again reorganizing his campaign. Donald Trump 3.0?
Because she knows one thing that Donald Trump doesn't know. Never, ever been a good bet to bet against the United States of America.
Holding on to an electoral surge, Hillary Clinton gets a little help from her friends.
To legalize or not to legalize? Looking at ballot question 4.
Bay State voters will decide if recreational marijuana is legalized, and our guest today is Jim Borghesani of Yes on 4.
From WCPB Boston, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's Emily Rima this morning. Thank you for joining us on this August Sunday. This November, Massachusetts voters will decide whether to legalize recreational marijuana here in the Commonwealth. And today, we have Jim Borghesani, Communications Director for Yes on 4 campaign.
Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
So before we jump in, a little bit of background. Right now, we have 4 states. We have Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska. They have all made the sale of recreational marijuana legal. District of Columbia, they have also done the same. And of course, here in Massachusetts, we now allow the use of medical marijuana, along with 23 other states. So let's just break it down to basics. Why should marijuana be legal recreationally in Massachusetts?
Well, there are many reasons. First of all, the current system is a failure. It has done nothing to protect teens from marijuana. It's easy access. Drug dealers don't check IDs. It's been an absolute failure. It's been subsidized by taxpayers without returning anything to taxpayers, except more costs in arrests, incarceration, and many other law enforcement costs. What we're proposing is a system that would actually start to control marijuana in Massachusetts. It would also give people who require medical marijuana a chance to get some without breaking the law. I'm talking specifically about people who do not want to be placed on the list in Massachusetts. Right now, when you get a medical card...
Placed on the list? What do you mean by the list?
But if you get a medical card in Massachusetts, you're placed on a state-maintained list. We don't have a state-maintained list for gun owners. A lot of people, particularly veterans, federal employees, don't want to be placed on this list because they don't want to lose their federal benefits, their pensions, because, as you know, marijuana is illegal at the federal level. So this would help a lot of people who require therapeutic marijuana to get it.
Because you could grow a small portion in your home.
You can grow a small, but you could purchase it legally at a retail shop without, again, having to go on a list that a lot of people don't want to go on. A lot of people don't have access to. There's only a handful of stores open now, retail stores for medical. We have medical marijuana laws, but we haven't realized the advantages of a medical marijuana system. Yeah, that's just one reason. The other reason is that it would correct the many social injustices that have occurred on the war on drugs. Right now in Massachusetts, even with decriminalization, a Latino person is 4 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana offense than a white person, despite equal use rates among both communities. So it would correct the social injustices that have occurred. The third reason, and there are many more, but the third reason I would state is that marijuana now is prevalent in society. It has been for decades. There's a thriving marijuana market now. We think that we should take commerce away from criminals, from drug dealers, put it under the authority of local authorities and state regulators.
All right, so let's talk about it. You know, you've heard the argument before. Marijuana is a gateway drug.
Yes.
To that you say?
We say that's false.
Well, according to Robert Dupont, as the president of the Institute for Behavior and Health, he says marijuana is positively correlated with alcohol use, cigarette use, illegal drug use, and cocaine and methamphetamine.
He's wrong. I would like to see a scientific study that shows that, because we haven't seen a single credible scientific study that shows that marijuana is a gateway to anything. If there's a gateway at all, it's 2 things: tobacco and alcohol. We have seen that early use of tobacco.
Both legal, by the way.
Both
tobacco
legal.
And alcohol.
We've seen that early use of tobacco is a gateway to other substances, not necessarily because people are seeking other substance, because that indicates a social problem, at home, perhaps, something in the way a person is raised, some sort of a deficiency, if you will, that will lead toward substance abuse. One of the early indicators is early smoking of tobacco. The notion that marijuana leads to anything as a gateway has not been proven scientifically by anyone.
Let me play. First of all, let's play Marty Walsh, the Boston mayor, who has been in alcohol recovery. Again, his first words at the Democratic convention were, "I'm Marty Walsh, and I'm an alcoholic." He's a recovering alcoholic. He's in recovery for nearly a quarter of a century, and he's also working to defeat legalizing marijuana. Here's what he had to say. Listen.
Marijuana is illegal and alcohol is legal. They can call me whatever they want. Explain to the people of Massachusetts why it's important to legalize marijuana. I think that would be a good start.
Okay, to him you would say?
I would repeat what I just told all of you, that we think that the current system is a failure. We think that good societies recognize public policy failures and improve on them. And that's what we're trying to do in this. We want to have a system that, again, isn't subsidized by taxpayers, but returns revenue to taxpayers that will actually, decrease access to teenagers. People think that the notion that legality will increase use has been proven wrong in every state. In Massachusetts, teen use is declining, despite the fact that we had decriminalization in 2008.
But to that, where it's Emily said at the beginning, it's legal in Colorado. Yes. Colorado has shown a 19% growth in teens. So in that state, it has shown a growth. 12 to 19%, which is a wide range.
I'm going to dispute that. The most recent report that came out, the Healthy Kids Colorado Survey, the widest and largest survey of its kind in the country, 17,000 kids surveyed. The report just came out in June, shows teen use flat in Colorado.
Is this a tough year to be doing this? I mean, this entire year we've done stories about the opioid epidemic. And, you say it's not a gateway drug, but you have these leaders in our state, Governor Baker, Mayor Walsh, who are saying when they speak to people at these drug recovery centers, they're hearing, I started with marijuana. So do you think that this is the year that, it's a tough year when everyone is so concerned about opioids and their children.
Should be concerned about opioids. The largest indicator or the largest reason that we have an opioid crisis is opioid themselves, the vast overprescription of opioids over the last 15 years. And I would point out that Governor Baker does talk about marijuana in relation to opioids when he's talking about our question. If you watch him or the Attorney General or the Governor Baker's top public health official, Monica Burrell, Dr. Monica Burrell, Commissioner of the Department of Public Health, she never mentions marijuana once when she's interviewed when it comes to opioids. She never mentions it. It's a political consideration used by Governor Baker for obvious reasons.
That's the second time you referenced the governor. So let's play the governor. On Beacon Hill, you've got some heavy hitters that are lined up against legalizing the recreational use of pot. Here is the governor on who thinks it's a gateway drug. Listen to this.
I've talked to too many people in the healthcare, education, and addiction community who tell me it's a really bad idea.
No, and simply put, a bad idea.
Well, I would go back to Dr. Monica Burrell recently on NPR when they talked about the increase in opioid deaths in 2016. She never mentioned marijuana once. She was on a 30-minute interview on TV in May, all about opioids. She never mentioned marijuana once. When there's a political consideration, suddenly it becomes marijuana is leading to this. But when you look at the opioid crisis as an analyst or as a physician or as a scientific body, like the CDC recently came out with guidelines for opioid prescriptions, and they mentioned the factors leading to opioid addiction. They did not mention marijuana once.
Now listen to what the Attorney General has to say in her statement here. As I mentioned, there are many who are lined up opposed to this, and here's the Attorney General, Maura Healey. This is what she said on OTR.
Just to look at something like THC levels. THC in marijuana, 4% back in the 70s, the 80s. It's up to 20 or 30% right now.
Okay, so it's a different item than it was when we were growing up.
Yeah. There are some strains that have a larger percentage of THC. There are some strains that don't. Yes, but the strains that the Attorney General mentioned, they have been in society for 20 years. So we're not introducing anything to the market that doesn't already exist. All we're saying is let's finally take control of this in a way that has worked for alcoholic beverages in Massachusetts since Prohibition ended. We have a regulatory system, and we think that is the best way to actually start controlling marijuana, rather than just thinking that by making it illegal, the problem isn't there. The problem is there.
Let's go to the OTR pop quiz, but today it's the OTR pot quiz, I guess. Sorry about that. All right, question 1. What current world leader said this? When I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
I'm going to guess Justin Trudeau.
Well, you're in the right comment. President Obama said that. Here's question 2. By the way, Mr. President, if you're watching right now, you did say that. You did say that. Here's question 2. Which former U.S. president said this about marijuana? And I'm quoting here. Penalties against possession of a drug should not be more damaging to an individual than the use of that drug itself. Nowhere is this more clear than in the laws against possession of marijuana in private for personal use. That was a former U.S. president that said that.
I would say President Clinton.
President Carter said that.
President
we
Carter.
continue on the record. Stay with us.